Hey y'all, welcome back to Dots and Beyond. My name is Beth. Today we are going to set up my personal bullet journal for April 2023 with a Bookstore Vellichor theme. If you are new here, I am choosing themes for my bullet journal this year based off of playlists on Spotify that I already have. And some of those choices I am actually leaving up to you, my viewers. And for this month, my viewers picked Bookstore Vellichor. This playlist is comprised of songs that I would play if I threw caution to the wind and opened up my own used bookstore. Now, originally I planned to do this setup with printables, much like the cover art that you see in that little square above, but I've decided I'm just going to do this in black and white with some book doodles, a little few surprises on the weeklies, so let's go ahead and get started. Any supplies I use will be linked in the description box below, but y'all know me, we are going to go ahead and start off with a stencil because I do love my font stencils. Some of you are probably asking, what is Vellichor? Well, Vellichor is spelled V-E-L-L-I-C-H-O-R, and it is the pensive nostalgia and temporality of used bookstores. It's a fake word. It was coined by John Koenig on his blog, The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. Putting them side by side, Bookstore Vellichor is a little bit like Welcome to the Department of Redundancy Department, but I do like the rhyming and the alliteration that goes into that, and so I went ahead and combined those two words for the title of my playlist. Now, because I am using playlists as my inspiration, I also like to take my quote pages from the songs of those playlists and at least highlight one or two songs through the course of this setup. This month I'm only doing the one. It is here on the left, and if you have a keen eye, you might notice I'm actually switching back and forth between the stencils. So I have two stencils that came in two completely different packs that are almost identical to one another. One of them is a little bit larger so that all that fits on the stencil is the capital and lowercase. The other one is a little bit smaller, so I have the capital, lowercase, and the numbers on that one. And this song is Reading in Bed by Emily Haynes and the Soft Skeleton, and the quote I chose is, "Sing from a book you were reading in bed and took to heart all of your lives unled." And if you like the idea of helping me pick a playlist theme, stick around. Here at the end of the video we are going to be picking my theme for June. I decided May is one of those ones I'm going to keep to myself, and honestly I still haven't chosen what playlist that's going to be, so it'll be a surprise for both you and me when I do my May setup. I do like to sneak the playlist title into my cover pages, so here I am putting Bookstore Vellichor on a small bookmark, and I am going to use this bookmark theme carrying forward to kind of add some continuity to all the pages. With the quote page done, we're going to move over to the right side of the spread, and here I am just going to sketch in the facade of a used bookstore. I am going to curve the top of my windows, but otherwise this entire store facade is done with straight lines. So some of the panels and the doors are just 2 squares by 2 squares. Some of them are a little longer at 2 squares by 3 squares. Again, the windows just have the normal panes in them that are 3 squares, I think, by 4 squares. Just kind of have to sketch it out with the door and the windows, add a little bit of texture, maybe with a curve on the window, which I'm doing here with the circle stencil. Once the basic sketch was in, I knew I was going to need some solid black for contrast, and I did not decide ahead of time what areas I was going to leave and which ones I was going to color black, so I am just doing that on camera, figuring out pretty much the panels that I'll make black. So the door, the bottom to anchor it, one of the panels at the top again to anchor it, adding a little bit of shadow on our bookmark, all of those things with a Tombow Furunosuke just because it has a really great black. And then our bookstore can't be empty, so we're going to go ahead and put in some book iconography, an open sign, a couple of plants, a lampshade hanging down, just so that it looks like we're looking in on a bookstore scene. Just to give them a little bit more interest. Once I had all of that sketching in, I did stop to ponder, feeling like something was missing, and I am going to go ahead and color some of our books a solid black as well. Our window displays definitely look a lot better with some of those books in black, and that will wrap up the cover page for Bookstore Vellichor, and we're moving on to my April dashboard. Now, my April dashboard is going to be very reminiscent of my March dashboard because it really worked for me, so we're going to go ahead and get that the headers in. And how I set this up is on the left side of the spread, I have both a linear calendar as well as my habit tracker. So here we're getting ready to go ahead and put in a mini calendar. Do like to have the mini calendar, as well as the days of the week down sort of offset of the center. I like to have a little bit more room to write on the left and then have my habits on the right. In March, I did do that directly down the center, and I had a little bit too much space for my habits, so I just squished that over and gave myself a little bit more space to write. The right side of the spread will be host to a couple of to-do lists. So at the top, I am just sketching in your friendly neighborhood bookstore cat sitting on a shelf with some other books. Inside of that, I will actually write projects on the book spines. And then here at the bottom, I'm putting in a chaise lounge with a stack of books and a coffee cup, because I just feel like it gives you that whole lived-in used bookstore vibe. This was a piece of clip art that I just found with a regular Google search and chose to recreate it because I thought it was so cute. Like the cover page, once I have the initial doodles inked in, I do want to add some solid black here and there just to give it a little bit more interest and a little bit more contrast. So here we are doing that on the settee or the chaise lounge. And I'm going to also add some more interest up at the top with some doodles on the books just to give those spines some interest and to actually darken in the shelf that the cat is sitting on. One design element that I just can't get away from is that when I have these big open spaces, I want to highlight every other line. And if you can see here, this gray is running out. So I always have a backup N95 Tombow dual brush pen. See how much better this one is highlighting so that I can go in and get those highlights back on the page like they are meant to be. And now I just need to add some headers as well as some bullet points for my to-do lists, and those lists are a list for Dots and Beyond to-dos, home to-dos, freelance, and then just a general to-do list. Here is that finished dashboard page. Flipping back to the cover, we have our bookstore. We have some book iconography on this page as well. I did not want to draw books upon books upon books for every page, and so I decided, wouldn't it be fun if we explored some of our favorite types of books on the weekly setups. So for my first weekly, I did do a bookshelf, but I did not go all in on the books, and I decided that I would draw a little bit of a sort of fantasy collage landscape to indicate my love of fantasy books, and that's what we're going to do here on this first week. Otherwise, I am laying out each of my weeks very much like I did in March as well. So in March, I went back to structured weeklies where I left myself a space for each day, and then on one side of the spread, I also had a task list. Now, this is a good place in the video to mention that this video has taken me a little bit longer to sketch and draw and film and even edit because I have blown out my left knee. With some icing and some elevating and a knee brace, we are getting back to normal, but this video has been done in segments. You might see some lighting changes, you're definitely going to see a coffee cup change, and that's all part and parcel of letting my knee heal. I do prefer to work in a very well lit area at my desk instead of other places like the bed or the couch where I've been elevating my knee, and it's just taken a little bit longer to get this done. This is just one of those old high school basketball injuries, and of course nobody tells you how much harder it's going to be to deal with those things 30 years in the future. So I did mention before that I had two versions of the same stencil, and so this one here I used to get the numbers on the page. I am just going to collect the weekend into one box, so Saturday the 8th and Sunday the 9th are on one section. And here we're going to draw in some of our fantasy iconography as though it's coming out of a book. So I still have a book on the page, it's down at the bottom, but we're going to draw in a dragon, a candle, a castle, a moon, and a ship inside the moon, just some other fun things to indicate that this is a fantasy page for the fantasy genre of book. One of the things that I was able to do while I was on the couch or in my bed as opposed to the desk was go ahead and pre-prep some pages. So I have gone ahead on the subsequent pages and gotten all of the stenciling in. That was something that I could do with my journal in my lap while I was not filming, since it hurt to kind of sit at my desk and have my knee bent for a long period of time. And once again, with everything inked in on the page, I chose some areas to add some deeper contrast with the black just to give it a little bit more interest. And thank thank goodness I had a backup of that N95 because we're going to use this on each one of our weeklies as well. And that will wrap up the first week of April, which is the 3rd through the 9th, with my ode to the fantasy genre of book that you would find in a used bookstore. We are going to move on to week 16, which is set up very much the same way, just with the spreads flip-flopped one side or the other, and I also chose to not draw the little bookshelf up at the top. I just went with the genre doodles for this particular page, and this one is my classics page. With a degree in English literature, y'all know I couldn't do this without putting in a classics page. And as previously mentioned, I already have the functional structure here on the page simply because that's something I could do while I was away from my desk. Honestly, the hardest part of this setup was trying to figure out what I was going to doodle for each one of these genres. Some of them came to me very quickly, like the fantasy one. I really didn't have to think too hard about what I was putting on the fantasy page. Most of this page with the classics came to me pretty quickly as well, but then some of the others a little later on I had to do some Googling, look up some icons, look up some clip art, try to get an idea of what I wanted to put on those pages. Some of my choices were very generic, like the fantasy castle on the first page, and others were taken directly from literature, like the skull that is on this classics page. So any of those that you see and you recognize might have come from a very specific book on any of my weeklies. Go ahead and make a guess down in the comments below which weekly this was or which genre and what book you think my icon was meant to portray. Using that Tombow to highlight every other line for both aesthetics and readability, this page of classics is going to be done for this particular week, and we're ready to move on to the next weekly. And again, for just a little bit of interest, we're going to flip-flop the spread, and I will put the tasks this time on the right and the days on the left. Now, when I was growing up, my mother, the librarian, would feed me historical fiction so that I was not only reading, but I was also learning some accurate tidbits here and there. And to this day, literary fiction with a little bit of a historical bent is still one of my favorite genres. And while this might be one of my favorite genres, this was not my favorite page to sketch out. This is the one that I had the most trouble with. At one point in time, I had a covered wagon over top of my book doodle, but then I couldn't figure out how to get things to flow up the page towards this blimp that I'm putting in. It really was kind of a difficult decision to figure out what was going to go where and what icons I was going to use for literary fiction. I do feel like it came together in the end. It's still not my favorite of the 4 weekly spreads, but it's definitely better than it started off as. I did almost do another castle on this one as well, because again, historical fiction, you could certainly do a castle, but instead chose to put in this silhouette of a princess or queen. I also drew in a globe because I will make almost any excuse on the planet to draw in a globe. It's one of those things that I just like to doodle, and this page will be done. Tell me in the comments below, what would you have sketched in for literary fiction or historical fiction? I also made a small mistake on this page and forgot to offset my week numbers by 1 column here on the mini calendar, and I had to cover that up with a little bit of sticker paper in order to correct that mistake. And this is me just flipping back to that first weekly where I have this bookshelf and trying to decide if I wanted to put them on the subsequent weeks. I still haven't added that in. I really just don't think it needs it. I do like having a little bit of white space on the page. Okay, moving on to the final weekly, and this is going to be my science fiction genre page. This one was a little more difficult for me to flesh out than I thought it was going to be. Every time I thought of something that I wanted to put on this page, I realized that it originated with television or movies and not necessarily the book. And I didn't want them to go backwards. I didn't want it to be like, oh, we have Star Wars movies and then somebody created a Star Wars series sort of a thing. I wanted it to sort of be original to the science fiction, and all I could think of was space iconography and science iconography. So that's kind of what we ended up here on this page. So I have a planet, I have a UFO, there's a meteor, there's a little astronaut, we've got some science things going on, and then I just threw in some dolphins to pay homage to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It really was a struggle and kind of pointed out to me that I need to be reading some more science fiction like Becky Chambers and take a break maybe from the fantasy for a little bit. And that will wrap up the weeklies with our fantasy, classics, literary fiction, and science fiction genres. And then just to anchor our Bookstore Vellichor theme, for the last spread we're going back to the books in the bookstore shelves. Now usually on the left side of this final spread I have some sort of a playlist, and as you guys have been selecting my playlist themes. I've asked you to recommend additional songs that I can add to my playlist that match the current playlist and round it out and make it a little bit more interesting. But I really don't need a playlist this month. I really need a place where I can write down my tiny wins. So for April, I've created myself a spread, which is very much like a 1 line a day spread, but I am just titling it Smile File. And my idea is to write down one thing a day that I'm not necessarily grateful for, but one thing a day that I did that I'm proud of myself for doing. And I think most of those things are going to be tiny wins. There are those days where we have the big wins, and of course I'm going to write those on my Smile File as well. This is more about acknowledging the day-to-day tiny wins that I need to be paying more attention to in my life. For the bookstore imagery on this page, I'm doing just another bookshelf up by the Smile File, and then at the bottom of my reflection page, I have a large open book. If you have a used bookstore near you, please make sure you're visiting those if you're a reader, or even if you just need to pick up some books for a reader or for your children. They definitely are a dying breed. I stopped by my favorite bookstore here in Little Rock recently, only to find out that they are moving out of the city. So now for me to get to that bookstore, it's going to take me a little bit more effort, and that's pretty sad to see. With all the doodling in place, the only thing we have left to do is again highlight every other line and then set up my lists for my reflection on the right side of the page. I am sticking with the same setup that I've done for the last couple of months, which is the 4 L's, things that I liked, learned, lacked, and longed for, as well as an area for world events. And then before we do the final flip through and pick our playlist for the June setup, let's go ahead and stick my cover page back here on my list of the 6 playlists from January to June. So far, those playlist themes have been Atlantis Fallen, Letters from Paris, Retro Roller Rink, and of course now Bookstore Vellichor. Really quickly, we are going to flip back through what we have set up for April today with my cover page, dashboard, and then my fun book genre weeklies with the fantasy page, the classics page, the historical fiction or literary fiction page, as well as science fiction, and then of course my Smile File and reflection page. And that leaves me only one thing to do, and that is to show you your options for picking my June playlist. And again, you can tell I've jumped to another day to get this part of the video in. But those options are going to be Stand in the Rain, which is the playlist I listen to when I need to rise up, get stronger, feel like a superwoman, and decide that I love myself today. Your second choice is Lovers, Spies, Truth, and Lies. It's a collection of spy tunes from across the decades that brings to life that undercover secret agent Bond 007 feeling. And third is For Marilyn, The Divas Sing for Marilyn Monroe, a story arc of the songs chosen from that of a young woman with a dream to that of a bombshell felled by the industry of fame. You can head over to the community tab now and make your selection. That is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.